There was a time when the world did not feel safe after sunset. Not because of animals, not because of war, but because something else walked the earth. Before history learned how to write, before cities, before kings, humanity believed it lived in a shared world. A world where the boundary between heaven and earth was thinner than we like to imagine.
But what the documents that make up what we call First Enoch are trying to extrapolate on is what's going on before the flood. So you have in Genesis chapter 6, this very, cryptic passage of the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and they came and they slept with them. And these women gave birth to these children that were the Nephilim, that were the heroes of old, men of renown.
Imagine trying to raise a family in a world where the greatest threat didn't come from other men, but from above, where the danger didn't move at eye level, but at the height of the trees. A rebellion spilling into the human realm, marking territory that belonged to God alone. Ancient texts don't describe this as mythology. They describe it as memory.
And so there's a bunch of different interpretations in the ancient world as to what this means. The Greek translation of the Old Testament translates Nephilim as gigas, which is giants. And so there's one particular understanding of that.
Genesis preserves the moment in a few haunting lines, but later Jewish writings tried to understand what that moment meant. They asked questions. What were the Nephilim? What became of them? And what happens when something that should never exist finally dies?
But then there's another stream of interpretation that's fleshed out in something like the Book of Enoch, where it talks about, okay, well, who are these sons of God? What were their progeny? What were the Nephilim? And how did this come into being? And so it kind of does this through a narrative about the great-grandfather of Noah, Enoch, and fleshes some of these things out.
Ancient Jewish thought wrestled deeply with this. There was a strong thread of belief that the Nephilim were not merely giants, but hybrid beings, born of the spiritual and the physical, creatures whose existence itself was a violation of cosmic order. And when they were destroyed, their bodies perished, but their spirits had nowhere to go. Not fully human, not fully angelic, unhoused, unfinished.
So the Nephilim, if you're taking a supernatural understanding of who they are, their fathers are angels, and their mothers are humans. So they're kind of these half supernatural, half carnal things. So when they die, their spirits don't have anywhere to go. So now they're trapped and they're wandering the earth. They're aimless, and they're constantly trying to get back into a physical form. And so they possess people. And because they're not really meant to do that, because they're these wayward supernatural beings, it never really works out, and they end up making people do all sorts of crazy things, and they're cursed because they're unholy. They're the progeny of fallen angels, and so there's all this stuff.
The ancient mind didn't ask, is this literal? It asked, what went wrong? Texts like the Book of Enoch and writings preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls describe the aftermath as catastrophic, a world cleansed by flood, but haunted by residue, spirits unbound, restless, cursed, not demons as later folklore imagined them, but remnants of something erased. If angels are spiritual and humans are physical, what happens when something is neither? The Bible hints at shades lingering in Sheol, restless remnants without a home, not at peace, not judged, not redeemed, seeking. Then they walked among us in flesh, towering, violent, claiming what was never theirs. Now, those same spirits linger without form. They slip into the cracks of the human soul, possessing, deceiving, twisting desire into destruction.
There are supernatural intelligences that are not friendly, that would just love to manipulate you and destroy you. And so what God is saying is, look, you don't do these certain things because these are rituals or habits or gestures of solicitation to other intelligences that, yeah, that will work. And it's not the point that God is a killjoy. He doesn't want you to know what's going to happen. He doesn't want you to know this particular, point of knowledge. The whole point of these kinds of prohibitions are, if you sort of get sucked into the spirit world on the dark side, or you traverse into it, you don't know what you're getting. It's not your realm. Don't think you know what you're encountering, what you're being told. You don't have any feel for this space over here.
The threat didn't disappear. It changed shape. Still hungry, still hostile, still seeking to reclaim what the flood denied them. And yet, their boundary-crossing nature makes them vulnerable, because there is one authority they cannot ignore. The Gospels feel different for a reason. When Jesus arrives, something changes. Demons recognize him immediately. Humans don't. They speak first. They beg. They tremble. They know who he is before he ever says a word. That recognition reveals their origin. They are survivors of a drowned rebellion, now facing the one who advances God's kingdom over territory they once claimed. They are not fairy tales, they are hostile intelligences, and they deceive with knowledge, secret knowledge, half-truths that promise power but deliver bondage. They are no longer monsters with bodies, they are hunger without form. The Bible never gives us a neat origin story for demons. It gives us scars, fragments, aftershocks. Demons may not be fallen angels. They may be what's left when a rebellion goes so wrong that God erases the world to stop it. Disinherited spirits, hostile holdovers from a corrupted age. Now listen closely, because this matters. One wonders whether the original rebels, the sons of God who took human women, intended this outcome. Whether the creation of hybrid beings was a strategy. A way to spawn agents who could continue their defiance even after judgment fell. Unbound spirits able to move between realms, extending rebellion where their creators no longer could. Not omnipresent like God, but invasive, persistent. Whether foreseen or not, the devastation endures, waves of pain, suffering, disorder, rippling through humanity from that ancient fracture. And in that shadow, we begin to understand something startling. Why Scripture says the righteous will one day judge the angels, and why Jesus didn't come only to forgive sin. He came to finish a cleanup that began before history learned how to write.